Well, good morning. So what's your expectation this morning? What do you want from me? Well, you want a nap? Do you want to be edified? Do you want to be entertained? Do you want to be bored? Well, I'm going to tell you what I expect. I thought about that. I said, what do you think I expect of you? Just being here. It's just beautiful. And the more and more that we have, you don't see my view. One of these days, I think I'll have the camera set up to where it'll actually shoot out that direction, and you may not like to see yourself, but you'll see kind of my perspective going out. It's very intimidating, especially to young men, right? When you're starting out and you're leading singing or doing something and you're having to look out at people. They say next to death, public speaking. But after so long, one of the things that you start to enjoy is to see people, to see somebody, and to care. I can't read your hearts, and I don't want to. That's not my job. That's God's. But I am very happy to see you this morning and excited that you've joined us if you're on YouTube or Facebook. And this morning as I was coming in, I practiced what I preached. I looked around and looked at the sun as I was going down the road on my phone, paying attention to it. Okay, how many people touch their phone when you're on your way in this morning? Oh, come on. Somebody. You had to touch it to bring it into the car, right? But we're so distracted. There's so much going on. Little alerts come up, Facebook, and you get Instagrams or Twitter or something like that, constantly getting us off track on different things and involved. And you probably heard this last week of all the things going on with the way that Facebook is doing this and that. And you know what? You're still individually responsible. I completely agree. I think there's some very horrible things with a lot of the social media. But there's also some really wonderful things. And you wouldn't have heard me say that a year and a half ago until I actually did some research and dug in. Now, there's some things that are going on that are bad, that are creating a lot of things that have, I think, propelled us into the state in which we're in today. And it's very terrifying to me to watch this country. Now, okay, I'm going to give my age. I was born in 1961, so I kind of missed the hippie years, but my sister didn't. So she brought it home. So Janis Joplin and some of the posters and things that were going on. And I was young enough to watch the demonstrations that were happening around the country. Even in Albuquerque, New Mexico, I remember that, 8, 9 years old, about some of the things. It was terrifying to me as I looked at it. And I see today that it's not the same. It's worse. It really is. And it just shakes me to the core. I was coming to the church building on Thursday, and I'm driving along, and we had the barrels up. We're doing construction on the university exit up there, and they had it down to shut down to one, where they're pushing us all over to one lane to the left. And there's cars figured it out. We're all kind of stacking up appropriately. And this one car, I was watching in my rearview mirror, just flying up, not knowing that they're fixing to lose that lane they're in. And knowing what they're going to do is they're going to shoot past 40 cars that are stacked up in one lane doing it right, and then want to get in. That's exactly what happened. This car comes flying up, and then all of a sudden she's trying to get across. She's got her phone like this, not even trying to hide it. And you know what she did to me? When I looked over at her like that, and she looked at me, she waved with me with one finger. And I think you can guess which one. I started laughing at her, because she had to come to a screeching stop, and she looks over like that at me, and she gives me that middle finger, and I just started laughing. I laugh when I'm in trouble, so I laugh all the time. But I just started laughing at her, and I waved at her like that. It's like, what warranted that? Where does that visceralness come out in people? That's just one little incident, isn't it? That we see happening. Tearing friendships apart, even in families, dividing our country, and who's right and who's wrong. To me, people with different opinions need each other. Because I know my opinion's always right. But sometimes I have to realize, maybe you do know something. Maybe. And the way that I become smarter is by listening. But nobody's listening. Everybody's got it already set. Everybody's locked and loaded. And, it's just this constant, fighting and it's just driving me crazy. Because I see a great nation. I see great friendships. I see great communities that are just being ripped apart. Where when this nation, at times of national crisis, would pull together cultures that were so diverse from each other, you would say they would never even talk to each other as they walked down the sidewalk. But they pulled together. They had those differences. There's something greater. Something greater was uniting them. And I'm here to tell you, it's gone. We have killed God. We really have. And it's been a slow, chronic death that started when I think I was young, and when my grandparents and my dad were fighting against that crazy hippie music and stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's some of that stuff I still like. But they saw some little things coming. And I got ridiculed one time when I said that really the immorality and the acceptance of a lot of the sexual immorality started with a comedy show that was on television called Three's Company. Y'all remember that? I watched it, loved it. It's funny. But we didn't see what was being brought out to us. If you don't know the show, go look it up. But it opened up a door that started bringing in things. And those who were repulsed by it kept it to themselves. You have your rights. And that's okay. There's a point where I feel that we don't pick up arms and bats and go out as Christians and just beat our faith into anybody else. We never seen that happen with the Christians of the first century. We never saw Jesus handle it that way. But they sure weren't quiet. When truth was turned upside down, God's people boldly, lovingly, and humbly proclaimed the truth every time. And did not sit on the sidelines. There's no more sideline, by the way. If you're going to sit on the sideline as a Christian and you think you're going to be able to get away with it, they're going to drag you out on the playing field and ask you what you believe on things. Whether you're a Christian or not, that's already happening. And you will be pulled apart instead of being able to hold your own little personal beliefs. And I think a lot of this goes back to Christians not standing up in a loving, humble way. Saying, I'm sorry, but I strongly disagree with you. You can have your opinion. I respect you have a choice. But it's not right. Whatever the issue may be. If it's against God and it's not according to God's teachings, it's not right. So we are living in the result of a world that's godless. So don't be surprised. And I'm saying that to myself as I sat and prepared this lesson. I had to sit and go to myself. Well, why is it? Well, there's no God. This is what a godless nation looks like, a godless world. You take God out, and it's every man for himself. Isn't it? It goes back to supporting evolution. The strongest survive. The weaker, well, they deserve it. They should have been stronger. And it's this one word that is so against God, that kills God every time, is the word selfish. And you sit there and you go, oh, I'm not selfish. Yes, you are. We all are. We all have some selfishness in us. We all have lust within us. We all have anger within us. We have them. We need to understand them. If you didn't have some self-confidence, some selfishness, you would die. You have to care about yourself, absolutely. God has never said, take that away. But if you look at every sin you can think of, every sin, we forget that the root of it is selfishness. Every sin, sit and think of one, where there is not a victim and a perpetrator, somebody who did it and somebody who suffers. And every sin, take the 10 Commandments, take Leviticus, take every one of them, and you can sift it down to one problem. Self over others. That's what the word means. And that's what I see as people are driving around in their cocoon of a car. It's about me and my lane. It's about me and my time and how fast I got to get there. It's about my opinions over your opinions. There's no relenting, is there? There's just this constant thought that somehow, the world just spins around me. That is godlessness. You see, that's exactly what a little g God is. When I say little g, I mean, in other words, we make ourselves into something that we believe is all-powerful and self-sustaining. That we can sustain ourselves. We don't need anything else. Anything else that I need, I go get, and I deserve it. And so that makes the world spin around you. And that's the problem that we're facing as Christians. When we look at the idea that devoting ourselves to ourselves brings out so much violence on others around us. And it may not be, the brutality of violence that you think, but it is harsh. It's unloving. It's against everything that God is about. God gave you everything. You deserve nothing that He gave. You don't deserve one molecule in your body. They're His. And He not only gave you that, He gave you this beautiful world where you hear the birds and you see nature around us, like we were singing that song this morning. This is my Father's world, and He gave it to you. And we messed it up, didn't we? Starting in the garden, we messed it up. And God gave us more, didn't He? He didn't just stop and say, okay, that's it, man. I did all this effort and putting everything together and created all this stuff, and you blew it, so I'm going to take it back. No. He gave us more. Because in that moment that we should have been punished, He gave us hope. There were consequences, but He gave us hope. What He told Eve. And He was faithful. And that's what the Bible shows us in the Old Testament. Is that in spite of our selfishness, our sinfulness, He continued to give and give. No matter how selfish we continue to be. And we are all selfish because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And if all sin goes back to selfishness, then we're all selfish. Because every time we sin, we are serving ourselves over others. And so it comes back to that. And yet the one verse that almost every person I know memorizes, displays at sports teams, is John 3:16. God so loved the world that He gave His only unique or begotten Son. He gave Him. But that love, let's stop right there. God so agaped the world that it doesn't say God so felt good about the world, right? It's not that. God felt so wonderful about the world that He gave His only begotten Son. That's not what that agape means. That's where also we have gone down the wrong path. Is not understanding what true love is. We think that somehow love is that little flutter in our belly when we first met our significant other, our loved one, right? Or every time I think of somebody, I get that little flutter in my belly, and oh, that's love. That's not God's love. That's not God's love. So I challenge you to think about your love, how you love. There's nothing wrong with getting excited about the ones you care about and getting the butterflies. There's nothing wrong with that. Those are beautiful. They're created within us. They sustain us. They give us a part of life and connects us. But if that's where you stop, you fall right over into the selfish again. Because once that love stops giving me the little butterflies, I'm like an adrenaline junkie, I will go find it somewhere else. Because it's about me. Sorry, I don't get the butterflies anymore. I don't get a warm and fuzzy when I think of you. But boy, she does. Or it does. See how it goes back to selfish again? So if you've got the wrong concept of love, and that's what's driving you, then you're going to fall back to the self. Because agape is not self. Agape is everyone but yourself. And God demonstrated that in the creative order of all things that He put into place, all the way through, time and time and time again. In spite of our lack of agape towards Him, He gave it to us. So that should help set the foundation right there as we start to evaluate this problem. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but please understand that the selfishness is worldly. It is not of this world at all, is it? James 3, he says there, he says, wisdom does not descend from above. That's the wisdom of the world. Care for yourself, evolution, strongest of the fittest, and I'm adding kind of in there. Does not descend from above. It is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. Wow. Look at that. Look at the list. And you can see these aspects just radiating out at us right now. We shouldn't have to be told. Because we're supposed to be sinless anyway. We got that. We get that. And you say the last people that we should have to tell is Christians. That you shouldn't be selfish. But again, I marvel at the idea when I look at the New Testament, all those letters written to Christians, they're written to Christians because they share those problems. We still struggle with all of these things. And we still struggle with selfishness. I see brethren who say they love the brothers, but then they turn around and they do something selfish. They put themselves above someone else. And the way they judge them, think how they're doing things, or how they dress, or whatever it might be. Still happens. And we think that we're righteous. So it's a danger. Philippians 2, verse 2 and 3, the Apostle Paul, he says, fulfill my joy being like-minded, by being like-minded, having the same love, being of the same accord, of one mind. Let nothing be done through self-ambition or conceit, but lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Wow, there's so much packed right in that one verse. That's the one verse that, when it came into my mind, just exploded this sermon into reality. Because of the way he says it. Like-minded. Didn't say agree on everything. Didn't mean you're all robots. But he means we share something in common. The same agape. Not the eros, not the Philadelphia, not those. The same agape, which means I want the best for you, whether you deserve it or not. Do you think that way sometimes when you look at your brother and your sister in Christ when they do something really silly and dumb or hurtful to you? Do you still want the best for them, or do you want to get even? Or do you want them disciplined, or you want the elders to talk to them? Or do you want the best for them in spite of what they may have done to you? I know I'm struggling with that at times. There's times I'll admit, I'm getting better the older I get. By the time I die, I might have it right. But it's a challenge. But that's one of the biggest problems I find in congregations is you have these little problems that develop, and when they come up, it really hones down to this point. Did you think of the other person first instead of first being offended about what was wrong to you? Did it bother you because it just hurt what you believe? It was against what you feel? Because I can take you to God, and He's got a whole list on all of us that could say the same thing. Let nothing be done through self-ambition, and especially when it comes to Christians. Can you say that about the world right now? Are we giving up and doing things for others first and humbly submitting ourselves to one another? Can you imagine a world like that? No, I can't either. Honestly, I can't, unfortunately. But I've always said it, that if people were taking care, if you were spending all your time taking care of others, and everybody was so busy taking care of others, I would have to run you off to get off my back to try to take care of me. Stop! You're okay, I'm okay. We'd be taking care of each other. My needs would never develop because everybody would be taking care of me so much. I wouldn't have to worry about self because everybody else is worried about myself. And it's a beautiful thing because of what it does for our psyche, what it does for us spiritually, because that's God. That's God-like. You want to be God-like? Always put others first. And that's the lesson he tries to say. Very clearly, Paul shows in Romans chapter 2, 7 through 9 about this type of condemnation that comes about. But those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation, wrath, tribulation, and anguish. It's all going on around the world, isn't it? We're suffering from that. And I don't bring this up to try to make this lesson a downer and make you feel down. I want to bring a reality to us as Christians because it needs to start with us. It ain't going to start with the world. The world is selfish. They're involved in it. But that's where we can no longer sit on the sidelines and not shine our light and let people see something different. You see, that's what happened when Jesus stood before the high priest. That's what happened every time Jesus stood before an enemy. That's what happened when Moses stood before Pharaoh. People were able to look between the two and make a choice. Follow Pharaoh or look at Moses. Because what happens is exactly what was described about Pharaoh when Moses came before him. What does it say? His heart was hardened. God didn't do that. You know what happened? Righteousness did. And people who are watching and seeing start to know the difference and have no excuse. But what are people seeing out there today? Do they see some righteousness, some goodness, some agape? Because we will destroy it if we show it. It will destroy evil every time. It will overcome it. It has. It has, and it will again and again. This is a bumper sticker I wish I had. I could go around and slap on people's cars at times, you know. Sometimes, don't you want to do that? You know, when you see somebody act out, you know, there was that old comedian, he used to, no, I don't think he's that old, but he'd always say, here's your sign. I almost want to say, here's your sign. But I know that ain't right. That's not the way we show it, is by pointing them out. You're just selfish. You just love yourself. What you do is you love them. Even though they love themselves, you love them. You agape them. And they'll start tearing those bumper stickers off. Because we need to show them how to stop being selfish. I just have faith in God that we will be able to overcome. We can do it. But it starts with every individual. And every individual Christian then becomes a collective. And eventually we start to show that. And I think that we have allowed our faith to be tampered down to a critical point in our lives, in our history, that we can't afford it any longer. We are here to show God. We are here to guide people to eternal life. And we have to expose the difference between God love and world's love. Selfless versus selfish. So how do we do this? When we think about the ways we can avoid it. You know, when I put this point together at first was, having a habit of thinking of others first. Well, let's have nice thoughts, okay? Some people I know, they think a lot about other people. But it's a different type. It's like what Paul said in Philippians chapter 2, 25, which I continually marvel that such a positive, uplifting letter could be written in prison. He was encouraging and so uplifting to people who weren't in prison. And at this one moment in life, in his life, this was looking like it could have been a death sentence for him, that he wasn't going to get out. He faced so many of those. And yet, he cared enough for others instead of moping about being in prison. And woe is me. Can somebody pay the bail? Can somebody speak up for me? But he still cried out with this. And yet, he says, yet I considered it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my fellow worker, my fellow soldier, but your messenger, and the one who ministered to my needs, since he was longing for you, was distressed because you had heard he was sick. He had so much care. Even the messengers between, we see that they were worried. They had that type of love and bond that they had for one another. The Apostle Paul in Romans 1, in 9 through 12, for God is my witness, whom I serve in my spirit, the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers, making request by some means, now at last I may find a way in the will of God to come to you. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gifts, so that you may be established. That is, that I may be encouraged together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. He didn't say, I want to come and just hold you a gospel meeting. I just don't want to show up and so we can just reflect on, our war stories of being a Christian. His desire and love was for his brethren to help to build them up spiritually. And this, to bring them some form of a spiritual gift that he could bring to them. When we look at one another, what spiritual gift are we bringing to one another? And I don't mean miraculous. But we have a lot of gifts. We have a lot of things that we can do, that we do for one another. Do we yearn to be with one another? Do we yearn enough to have a care for one another's spiritual needs? Because I know that all of us are not on the same level when it comes to how well we're doing. It's just like our physical health. Sometimes we have colds and we get sick. Sometimes we're uplifted and we're healthy. And that happens to us spiritually. But if we don't come together, we don't know what's going on. And that creates a problem to where we find then, I don't think about you. You know why? Because you're just a dot on a camera, and I see you, I don't ever see you show up. I don't know who you are. I can't see the hurt in your eyes. Like a lot of people, I can see after 20-something years of seeing some people, I can see in your eyes when I come up here, that you're suffering. There's something wrong because the eyes talk, with a mask on or not. You can look at people and see. And I know you, and I can feel that. But when we're not together, I can't. And if you're not around, then I don't start thinking like the Apostle Paul here and saying, I need to help that brother or that sister in Christ. I need to see what I can do to encourage, to uplift them, and bring them through that. Each day we should be asking ourselves this question, is who are we thinking about? We see that the Apostle Paul, he prayed for Christians daily. There's a book, it's called The Prayer Life. I think it's by Dr. Charles Swindoll. It's The Prayer Life of Paul. Wow. You never think you could write a whole book, and it's a thick one, on the prayer life of Paul. He calls it the gospel of Paul, basically, because when you extract all the prayers that Paul did and you break them down and you look at them, it's amazing. We don't realize it. A lot of times his letters will shift and you don't realize he just went over to a prayer, a request, an intervention for people. That's how much he thought. In the middle of a letter talking about something, he would deviate and all of a sudden punctuate it with this cry to God or this concern to God for you. That's the model. That's something that we should look at. Back over in Philippians 1, verse 3, starting there. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, making request for you all with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ, just as it is right for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart, inasmuch as both in my chains and in my defense and confirmation of the gospel, you all are partakers with me of grace. Who have you prayed for today? Do we pray for people? Specific. And I can pick on you because I have to pick on myself first, okay? So don't think I'm picking on you randomly or something, but I know my prayer life really lacks when I need to be more specific about people, individual people. And especially the ones that we know, right? The other thing is, what is wrong with conceding to other people's wishes? Now, when I was younger, I had a lot harder problem with that because I knew how right I was. And it was really hard to start. That's a hard process to start yielding. Yielding. Isn't it? In James 3:17, but wisdom that is from above first is pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. That's what we should strive for, is this idea of that type of wisdom. That's what's from above. Yielding is not weakness, by the way, okay? And it's not compromising. He never says anything about compromising the truth. That's not what he's talking about. It has to do with a lot of our personal interactions that we talk about sometimes. You know some stubborn people, don't you? It's always got to be their way. And it always makes you want to fight back and say, well, no, I'm not going to do that. But there's little things that happen that are so subtle at times. Little things that I don't think we even understand that happen, that we are not truly willing to yield and say, you know what, that's fine. You bring resistance, resistance comes back. That's the way it is. Really is. When you're willing to yield and somebody senses that that's the type of personality you are, it's interesting, it's kind of weird, but what happens is they stop trying to force. They start realizing, well, he's going to be reasonable. He's not going to just push back. He yields. He's able to listen and willing to accept what I have to say. No matter what I believe in my personal beliefs, in politics or sports teams or whatever, you know what? I have to respect. We were talking about Dallas Cowboys, remember? I'm picking on him after church last, we were such a ribbing about teams. Sometimes it gets vicious. But I respect that he likes them. And it takes away a lot. Instead of this bitterness of things where you find something that's a little different with one another, sometimes you find that. I don't want to get in specifics because then somebody will think, well, you're talking about me, like I just did you, huh? Sorry. But you know what I'm talking about. And these are the things that divide. And it starts out very subtly and it just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. So when's the last time you told somebody, well, that's okay, have it your way? And not in sarcasm either. Okay, well, have it your way. Say, okay, that's fine. Have it your way. And I tell you, and I'm not, sometimes I preach these sermons and I think everybody's going to think that somehow this church is having a problem with this topic or something. And it's the opposite. I really am serious. Here, I am so overwhelmed by our unity. And I know we have a lot of different opinions on things. Pretty sharp ones, don't we, on different things. And I'm not going to say the things. That you would even almost think, how in the world could you go to the same church? Well, I'll tell you how. Because we put one another first. And we have. And this little congregation here has gone a long, long time with ever having any of that type of stuff explode. Not that it hasn't happened. And I'm not going to say it's never going to happen. Knock on wood, right? As soon as I get up and say how wonderful, it might happen. But again, I keep saying these things because I want us to remember that we have to take it outside this building. We have to start demonstrating these things to the world. It's to start to give others preference. That's a part of the agape. God gave you preference over what He thinks is righteous, against what you think is good and bad. And He has the power to smash it like an ant, but He doesn't. I mean, think about Jesus walking around with those knuckleheads, those 12 guys, those disciples. Can you imagine how many conversations He just wanted to look at them and go, are you kidding me? Knock, knock, anybody home? You guys getting this? We're going to go do this. Let's go that. Let's burn this city up. No, you're not going to go to Jerusalem. And look at all that He bore with them and still agape them in spite of themselves, right? What a great God we have. What a great God we have. Is learning how to give preference like our Heavenly Father has. Paul says in Romans chapter 9, let love be without hypocrisy. What does that mean? Don't say it, but not do it. Don't say I have agape and I give others favor and I put them first and I really care for them when you really don't. Because your actions are going to be far louder. Abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be kindly and affectionate to one another with brotherly love. In honor, giving preference to one another. Another problem we see is that selfishness causes us to start dwelling on my life. And that's where, again, we can go back to the Apostle Paul. And not just Paul. Paul we have a lot written about. But a lot of the first century Christians, that's one thing they gave up. They learned to let loose and not become so excessively focused on the days of my life. But looking at what am I doing to make the lives of those around me better. And I keep saying this, and I'll keep saying this. We need to be that out there in our communities, in our families, at our workplace. Whatever hobbies you share with those who do not have the same faith or have no faith at all in God, they will see God in you, just like they saw God in that Nazarene, because He was God. We're not going to be perfect like Him in that way, but man, the power of what it had the effect on, right? So we have to look for ways to serve others, don't we? In Galatians 6:2, the Apostle Paul says there, bear one another's burden, and so fulfills the law of Christ. Wait a minute, I thought we shouldn't do adultery. I thought we shouldn't lie. I thought we shouldn't steal. I thought we shouldn't, and I thought we should go to church. I thought we should... What? All I got to do is bear your burdens and I take care of it? Woo! Hey, call me up, man. I'm going to take care of your burden and I'm good with Christ. All I got to do is carry your groceries in? Do I just need to go mow your lawn when you can't? Do I just drive you down? Bear your burdens and I'm okay with Christ? Boy, this is a deep one. This is one of those huge thoughts. How do you bear their burdens? You agape them. Because agape bears. Agape cares. Agape wants the best for others. And your problem's my problem. Your joy is my joy. Your sorrow is my sorrow. Your loss is my loss. And I'm always going to do what I can to make it a little bit better in your life. Bring a little more value and quality to your life by my existence. And if you're doing that, guess what happens? You're selfless. And if you're selfless, remember what I said about selfish? What is selfish? It's sin. It's all the sins you can name. So guess what happens by default? If you become selfless, what will happen? You become without sin. So then you are right with Christ, you see? So it does make sense what he's saying here. Because our bearing one another is putting others ahead of ourselves. We're giving them agape love. We're not going to hurt them. We're not going to lie to them. We're not going to cheat with them. We're not going to swindle them. We're not going to murder them. We're not going to talk bad about them. All those sinful things that are selfish. Then that brings us out from the condemnation of sin. And it fulfills the law of Christ. Sometimes I look back at these verses and I wonder, how did I miss that for so long in my own life? Because what I just said earlier about, well, if I just go carry his groceries or go mow some old Christian's, yard, then I'm bearing their burdens, because that's pretty burdensome, Phew, boy, I miss that. It's like when the young man came and asked Jesus, which is the greatest command? Attend the temple? Do the sacrifices? I mean, those are all really important, right? You got to have blood. You got to sacrifice to get sin. He said, no. Love God with all your heart. And that sounds easy. And then he tightens it up a little and says, but then you love your neighbor. You love everyone else as you love yourself. And then it ties back in again, doesn't it? You see how this keeps coming back to our salvation is about our ability to agape and be selfless. And every time that flares up and you think of yourself over someone else and your lack of yielding, you're sinning. You're sinning. We're breaking away from the very principle that fulfills that law of Christ. So our problems that we bear with one another, I mentioned this just recently, but it just keeps coming up in my mind about the story of this older gentleman at this congregation that when you'd walk in, he wouldn't say, how are you doing? He would say, how is your soul doing? He knows you're going to have headaches. You're still going to have to get up and go to work in the morning. Your car still isn't going to run. But what about your soul? What about your spiritual relationship? How's your soul doing this morning? Anyone ever thought about that? No. We get up, we check the creaks in our back, we go take the aspirin, the medication, we want to get better. But what about our soul? What about our soul? Paul says back in Philippians, you notice I'm in Philippians a lot? 2 verse 5 through 8. Let us have this mind in you, which was also in Christ, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking on the form of a bondservant, and coming in the likeness of men, and being found in the appearance as a man. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death of the cross. That's an extra jab, an insult to the way he died. There was a whole lot more honorable death than by the cross. And I love the way Paul tops that in there. Most insulting thing that a Jew could hear is that he was killed by a Roman cross. He not only humbled himself to the point of death, but he let himself be crucified on a Roman cross. Follow the example of Jesus. We have to look closer. Because one of the greatest lessons we learn is that he came to serve. Didn't he? Notice we keep coming back to that concept of selfishness and selflessness. Because what did he say? In Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. How many rulers, how many of the pagan gods that man ever created proclaim this? How many people born in royalty would say something like this? I was born into royalty. I'm the next in line to be a king. But I came to serve you. But our God did. So should we not reflect that? Should we not reflect that? Jesus came to serve, John 13:5. And after that, he poured water into the basin and he began to wash the disciples' feet, and he wiped them with a towel in which he was girded. And even Peter had a problem with that, didn't he? So there's another side to this too that I have seen. Some very spiritual Christians feel like there's a little humiliation when I have to allow you to help me. And you're stubborn. And I see some of this and I respect it because I've lived here long enough to watch a generation that cared for me and took care of my family and was there for me many, many times. And when it was time when they were vulnerable and they couldn't take care of themselves, and I would try to step up, all of a sudden the roles reversed. And I was not that little boy Ronnie anymore. I was Ron. I was their brother in Christ, no longer their little grandson, even though I was blood, and now I'm here to help them. Maybe it is, and I've done this. Go in and help them, take care of themselves, get dressed, go into the bathroom, things like that, because I had a medical background. I could do those things. And I would look at the humiliation in their faces and feeling like, no! And I had to look at one and said, you have to let me do this. You have to let me do this. It's my turn. Brother Alex Payne, remember him? How many times he wanted to go to the Lord and the Lord wouldn't take him? I don't know how many times. And he couldn't understand it. And I was visiting him in the hospital room one night, and I thought to myself, he said, he was so upset because the night before, I had seen him in the ICU. I could sneak in and I could be there, and I was there by his bedside, and he was so excited, and he was barely breathing. And he goes, I'm not going to see you tomorrow. I'm going to be with the Lord. And I was sad, and he was happy. Well, I go back in the morning, and I walk into the ICU, and I said, oh, the room's empty. I go, well, Brother Payne's gone. So I ask the nurse, and she goes, oh, no, he got better. He's up on the 3rd floor now. Oh, I went in there. You talk about mad. Brother Payne was mad. Why didn't the Lord take me? I want to go. And that's when I said, I was sitting there, and I thought about it. You know what? It's because I need something from you. I need to learn to serve. You have to let me serve you. That's what you're teaching me. And that's what each generation has to learn. We serve, and then we have to learn to be served, don't we? Just like Peter. Lord, you ain't washing my feet. And what did he say? Oh, yes, you are. But otherwise, you will have no part of this kingdom. So it's kind of funny because what is that all about? Pride. Self-image. Selfish. On all sides, it gets us, doesn't it? So how's your world turning? Does it turn around you? Some people don't even see this happening. I hope it's not. I know at times I thought the world revolves around me, and I know that sometimes it does. I fall back into that. It happens. We are not perfect. We are all going to slip. We're going to fall back. But we all want change, don't we? We want to see more peace, more love, more unity. But it has to start with you and me and taking out the image of His Son into this broken world. And no longer sitting on the sideline and hoping they'll see you and go, is that, yeah, that's Ron up there. He's a pretty good guy, huh? No, we need to be in the middle of it. And I mean in the middle of it, in other words, engaging in ways that are humble, but yet strong in the image of His Son, just like He did. And if you don't know how to do that, practice it. Go look at the encounters that Jesus had with people. And there are many times people were totally reshaped by this. You're not going to win everybody. If you're here with us this morning, I hope that if you don't have a relationship with Christ, I hope that you'll take this moment with all that we've said and become a part of this beautiful family that God has put together so marvelously, like He did you. Be the blessing to everyone. And you start by becoming a child of His, by being baptized, like the Bible is teaching. You know, to have those sins removed reconciles us back to the Father. If you're a Christian and you have fallen away, you put the world back around you and it's all about you, I hope that you will evaluate yourself too. All of us need to, like I said. So if there's anything we can do for you at all this morning in your relationship with Him, I hope that you'll take this moment while we sing this song to take action. Quit sitting on the sideline. The Father's coming. We don't know when, but He's coming. But let's make this world beautiful while we're here by having that right relationship with Him. So think about these things while we stand and we sing.
What a song of delight in a city so bright will be wafted beneath Ireland's fair dome. How the ransom will rise, happy songs in His praise, when all of God's singers get home. When all of God's singers get home, whenever a sorrow will come, there'll be no place like home. When all of God's singers get home. As we sing here on earth, songs of sadness or mirth, 'tis hope or taste of rapture to come. But our joy can't compare with the glory up there, when all of God's singers get home. When all of God's singers get home, whenever a sorrow will come, there'll be no place like home. When all of God's singers get home. Having overcome sin, hallelujah, amen, we'll be headed in the land of the foam. Every heart will be light, and each face will be bright, when all of God's singers get home. When all of God's singers get home, whenever a sorrow will come, there'll be no place like home, where all of God's singers get home. Please be seated.
I have a few announcements to